So hello everyone, my name is Brindley Brooks and I'm the founder and executive director of HS Connect. And we teamed up with cannabis expert Tamar Bibbs to bring you Exploring Cannabis Use in HS here today. We know we've got you for a little bit of time. It's because we've got a lot of info to cover, including kind of the lay of the land as far as cannabis goes, where it's legal, all of those kinds of things, how it came about. So we wanted to give you as much information and education as we can, and that's where Tamar comes in. And we're going to hold comments until the end, but I will be moderating the chat. So if you have questions that come up, please go ahead and put that in the chat so that we can get those addressed at the end. And we're going to try to get through this so we leave as much time as possible for questions at the end. So without further ado, Tamara, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Brandley, for this opportunity. I am so excited. Can you all see me, or is it still? I just want to make sure we're all good on everything. Everything good? Microphone check. Can you guys hear me?
They're all on mute, but yes, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect, perfect. All right, so thank you all for joining us today. I am so excited. Thank you, Brandley, for this opportunity for me to provide the HS community with this phenomenal information. I think that the information that we're going to be sharing today is definitely going to be worthwhile for those of us who currently have been diagnosed with HS or who are currently in remission. So whatever the stage is, whether you deal with HS yourself, you have a family member, or you know someone, I hope that the information today that we provide will help you in your journey. I want to move this over here. There we go. So quick disclaimer, the information in this webinar is for informational purposes only. This is not medical advice and should not be treated as such. The information in this webinar is provided without any representations or warranties expressed or implied. Content in this webinar is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding a medical condition. So with that being said, let us get started. I am so excited because this is one of my favorite topics to discuss. We are going to be discussing the 7 elements of cannabis, and we're going to demystify the legal cannabis industry. Again, my name is Tamar Bibbs. I am the CEO of IV20 Houston. We are a consulting firm located in the beautiful city of Houston, Texas. So if any of you all are from Houston or from Texas, hello. So get to know me, right? So a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Oklahoma. I've been in Houston for 23 years now. I am a wife, a mother, and I love to grow my own food. Fishing and travel are one of my favorite things to do. I'm also a certified medical marijuana specialist. I also have a comprehensive medical cannabis certification. I have also won awards in cannabis entrepreneurship. And if you are in the Houston or the Texas area, I'm also a referral partner for the Texas Medical Marijuana Doctors. I am also a certified plant-based wellness coach, as well as an entrepreneur and business mindset coach. And believe it or not, I was diagnosed with HS. My official diagnosis came in 2013. Prior to that, as a young child, I had acne. I was given a lot of medications, and probably like many of us that are here on this call, it was misdiagnosed. I was told that it was a variety of things, but it wasn't until I went to a dermatologist and after having a horrendous flare under my arm. I could not figure out what was going on. And she was like, "This looks like HS." And I was like, "What is HS? Can you break this down for me?" And then when she told me what it was, I had so many questions. I was confused because I was like, is this something I'm doing? Like, I know I take showers, I take baths, like, I know I'm a clean person, but I could not figure out what was causing it. And then in 2014, I ended up having to have between 2014 and 2016, I had a total of 9 surgeries. I've had a pilonidal cyst. I've had both of my axilla's removed. I've had to have a skin graft. I've had to have a wound vac. So, like many of you all who may be suffering currently with HS or who have had to go through a number of surgeries, hello, I've been there, definitely understand. But I also found a plant that was able to help me manage my HS and is currently what I'm using at this time. So again, as I stated in the disclaimer, this is not a thing for me to get out there and tell everyone to use cannabis, but it's definitely been something that has helped me out. And since then, it has also been a way for me to just spread awareness about this beautiful plant. So let's get started. A little bit about my business. What we do is we help entrepreneurs and business owners develop a positive mindset, a healthy body, and also to expand their business on a global level. And we do that through our education, our networking events, and cohorts that we host. So this is just one of the many things that our business does, but we also do it to focus on health and wellness. So today we will be talking about this beautiful plant called cannabis, and we will be discussing what cannabis is. We'll be discussing the history of cannabis, the science behind cannabis, the current laws regarding cannabis, the medical and the social impact of cannabis, the business of cannabis, the cultivation processes of cannabis, and the uses of cannabis. So for those of you who are out there, feel free to take notes. I am a teacher and an educator, so I love for people to take notes because I feel like the information that we're going to provide today is definitely going to help you in one form or another. So grab some pen and paper. Our objectives today will be to discuss the legal cannabis and hemp industry. We are going to provide insights on the legal cannabis industry. We're going to provide highlights on the history and the science behind it. We're going to bring more awareness to the medical and the social impact of the cannabis and the legal cannabis industry, the business and the cultivation of the plant, as well as the medicinal uses of the plant. So, yes, it will be recorded. All right, so quick quiz question for everyone that's out there in the audience. I want to know, which one do you think is hemp and which one do you think is marijuana? So in the chat, if you will, for me, if you think A is hemp, then you put A for hemp. Or if you think A is marijuana, you put A for marijuana. Whichever one you think it is, I want you guys to go ahead and put it in the chat for me. And the good thing about this is there is no, this is like a pop quiz. I like to kind of get feedback for where everyone is in relation to understanding the plant that we're going to be discussing today. All right, Joanna says A is marijuana. Yes. B is hemp. B, A is marijuana buds. Yes, yes. All right. So good response. I appreciate that. I do love feedback. So you guys, I do love for you all to talk back to me as much as possible through the chat. So you are correct. A is marijuana and B is hemp. And we are definitely going to discuss the difference between the two of those. So for those of you who do have questions, but what is the difference between the two? We are going to discuss that. So let's get started. What is cannabis? Cannabis is a species of the Cannabaceae family of plants. Cannabis contains the chemical compound THC, which is delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, which is believed to be responsible for most of the characteristics, psychoactive effects of the cannabis plant that leads to the high effect that a lot of us feel or we get when it is consumed, whether we consume it by smoking or whether we consume it orally. And however, most of these components of the plant is not psychoactive, which is where CBD comes in. So for those of you who utilize CBD, you'll understand why it is you don't get high, but when you do use THC, it's because of that one molecule difference. So we understand that cannabis comes in many forms. One of them is the dried leaves or the flower buds of the cannabis plant, which is known as marijuana, which can be smoked. A lot of people smoke it through a pipe, through a bong, hand rolled in a joint, or it can be consumed as an edible. For example, for people who use cookies or brownies or gummies, that plant can be broken down and used in that form. There's also the resinous secretions of the plant, which is known as hashish, which can be smoked and or eaten. And then there's also the fiber of the cannabis plant, which is cultivated as industrial hemp. And that's more used for textile manufacturing. So when you hear about clothing, when you hear about like wood or any of those things, that is the industrial side or the textile side of the plant. All right, so I know we've all heard some names for marijuana. We've called it butter, ganja, kush, smoke. So I'm curious, what are some of the names that you all put in the chat for me? Some of the names that you all currently call it. Okay, Sharon says weed. What other names do you all call it? I'm curious, because different areas call it different things. Here in Houston, we call it that good. So I'm curious, what other names do you all know cannabis to be called by? Ganja, ooh weed. I know that's right. That ooh wee, the gas, yes. Especially if you get some that skunk smell from South Dakota. All right, yes. Anybody else? What other names have you all heard it called? And the interesting thing about it is that pot, yes, pot. Some of them call it that lady smoke, the Mary Jane. So definitely there are a lot of different names uh for cannabis. And one of the things that we definitely want to be mindful of is that different demographics. As I've had the opportunity to travel through different areas, that they call it different things. The very first picture that I showed you all was a picture of me in Jamaica at a medical facility that grows, and they call it OG, like OG ocean grown down there. So that is the real OG when it's grown by the ocean. So anytime you hear of strands that are called OG, that's where they get it from. So, two things that we know about THC versus CBD. THC is psychoactive. It's also relaxant. It's an appetite stimulant. It causes drowsiness. It's an analgesic. It's a euphoria. It can cause paranoia as well as anxiety. The thing about CBD is it's non-psychoactive. It's neuroprotectant. It's anti-convalescent. It's an antioxidant. It's anti-psychotic, anti-inflammatory, anti-tumoral. It helps against pain. It nourishes the skin and hair via respective applications. And we'll go into more of those a little bit later in the conversation. So cannabis sativa is an annual plant that flowers. Typically it's been found in Eastern Asia, but now that plant has been grown all over, from Israel to Afghanistan. There's different cultivations that grow in different areas and regions, and partly because this plant is so resourceful, and it has over so many uses that it can be grown pretty much anywhere. It just depends on how the plant is grown. And it is used for seed oils, for food, for recreation. It's also used in a lot of religious and spiritual ceremonies. I actually seen, I think in Colorado, they actually have a cannabis church now. So it's very interesting how this plant has evolved over time, but definitely something that a lot of people do utilize for spiritual purposes as well as medicine. So when we talk about the history of cannabis, right, we're talking about a plant that, again, has been around longer than, it's been found in ancient tombs. But one of the things, especially with today being Sunday, I wanted to bring up several scriptures in the Bible where cannabis was referenced. And I say that because the hemp plant, specifically cannabis, is one of the many useful herbs that yield seeds after its own kind, right? So we know in Genesis 1 and 12, God created and blessed, he created and blessed on the third day of creation, all seeds, all plants yielding seeds, right? And he gave hemp for people to use of our own free will. The other thing is that God said, "Behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth. To you it will be for meat." And God saw everything that it had made, and behold, it was very good. That's in Genesis 1:29 and 31. But I also, and there's several other scriptures throughout the Bible, but I'm referencing Genesis and Revelation specifically because that is the beginning and the end. So I know all throughout the scriptures. And for those of you who are Bible buffs like myself, I challenge you to go in and just read up on herbs that are used for healing throughout the Bible. But the last scripture says, "A healing plant on the other side of the river was there, the tree of life, which bare 12 manners of fruits, in yielding her fruit every month, and the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations," a gift from God. So anything that bears seed, God placed on this earth for the purpose of healing, right? And cannabis is no different. And so I want you all to really understand that when we talk about this plant, it there is no shortage of where this plant can be used and for the purposes that it's been used for. So when we talk about the history of the plant, we know that cannabis was one of the first plant species to be cultivated and controlled by humans for the growth of and propagation. We also understand that when it comes to how the plant was spread around, we know that it traveled, right? Because when we look at um, in the beginning, we understand that most times when we talked about it, um, it was referred to as I'll use specifically the Bible, right? So we all have heard of the anointing oil, right? And what happened when the anointing oil was applied, they said that, people began to hallucinate or act out or speak in tongues. But a lot of times it was believed it was because they were under the influence of all the oils that made up the anointing oil itself. And so even when we look at in Chinese culture, um, it was called ma, which means mother. And it was also known as the great herb. So this plant has been used all throughout history as it relates to either for medicine, it's been used as textiles for rope. It's also been used in ceremonial purposes. So let's fast forward to the 1930s, right? When now this plant starts to go through the madman era as well as being banned because it was starting to take on a life of its own, and they started calling it the devil's lettuce. And people were using the plant and running out in public and hallucinating is what they like to call it. Well, I say they were just having a good time, but again, this was part of the reason why it was put into prohibition, because prior to that, cannabis was used in apothecaries as medicine. It was part of the medicines that were used. So you didn't go to a pharmacy, you went to an apothecary, and they gave you a mixture of herbs that were used to help heal whatever ailment or condition that you were having. So when we look at how this plant has evolved over time, now we are trying to get it back to where it was before, which is free, right? Where we could use it for medicinal purposes, where it can be used to help fund and aid our communities. And so now this is part of what we'll be discussing also when we talk about the social impact of utilizing this plant. And we also understand that the United States, oh, the good old US, there was an act that was placed on a tax on the sale of cannabis. And even now, for the states that have legalized cannabis in their states, we understand that there's still a tax. And I challenge you all to find out what those taxes are being used for in your community. There are some communities where they're using those taxes to help feed the kids in school. And then there's some states where those taxes are helped to, I don't know, for infrastructure. So definitely pay attention in your states where it's legal, what those tax sales are being used for. So let's talk about the science of cannabis. And this is one of the areas that I really love to discuss when it comes to the plant, because it's not just THC, it's not just CBD. There's many other cannabinoids that are found in this plant. So cannabinoids are any group or closely related compounds which include cannabinol and the active constituents of cannabis. And we know that THC, which is tetrahydrocannabinol, is a crystalline compound that is the main and active ingredient in cannabis. That's the one that everybody hears about, as well as CBD, which is the second most prevalent of the active ingredients in cannabis. And so when I first started learning more about cannabis and uh, the only one that I really knew about was THC. I came from law enforcement. Okay. So I was a police officer. And when I was educated about the plant, we were only told about THC. It gets you high, and then when you're high, you just, your eyes are bloodshot red. Like, this was literally the education that I got about this plant. And I just so happened to go to a meeting because I had gone through my surgeries, and there was a young lady there that was talking about CBD, and she kept referencing cannabis. And I was like, well, hold on, this is not something I've heard about. Like, do tell me more, right? And so when she started really explaining to me the benefits of CBD and what it helps with and what it helps to eliminate, I was like, do tell me more, right? And then when she started explaining, but that's just some of the cannabinoids that are found in this plant, I was amazed, right? And so when we talk about this plant, I really, want you guys to understand that this plant is when I tell you, the perfect flower, because it can do so much for us in terms of our health, in terms of our communities, in terms of what we are able to do with just this one plant. Like I said, it is for meat. It can feed you. It can do all of these things, but understanding it is what we have to do first. So when the plant is grown, and you'll see here on the side that we talk about the potency of the plant. Yes, hemp does heal. We talk about the potency of the plant. So these these are called excuse me, I'm sorry, my yeah, so when we talk about the plant, what we're looking for is how the plant is growing and how it is aging when it comes to the levels of THC, right? And so when we're looking at it under a microscope, you can see here the crystals that are being formed as the plant grows. And so when it's clear, that means that there's not enough potency of the THC, so it's not ready to harvest yet. And then when it's half clear, kind of half cloudy, we know that it's more energetic or a heady high. And so a lot of times, whenever you utilize the plant, if you're smoking it and you get this rush of a head high, it's because of when they harvest or when they pick the plant. And sometimes that can be good for those who want that sedative effect, but for those of us who don't want that sedative effect, it's really it can almost give you a headache when you utilize the plant. And so the highest THC levels is when these are kind of cloudy, right? And that's when the trichomes, they almost look like milk. Okay. And that's when you get that euphoria. So a lot of times you'll hear about indicas and sativas, and indicas are more of that euphoric head high, and sativas are more of the body high. Okay. So think sativa I call indica in the bed, and sativa is what helps you to stay up. Okay. So those are how I help people to understand. So if you want something that's going to keep you in the bed, just think indica, right? In the bed. Sativa, stay up. Okay. And then when you have a half amber, half cloudy, it's going to give you a head and a body high. Right. So that's normally when you find your 50-50 mixtures, or your hybrid mixtures. That's kind of how you would relate to that head and body high. And then when it's amber, harvesting when most trichomes are amber will give you will produce a more body high and a cough like high. So you ever seen somebody when they're smoking and they start coughing and it's just like and you like, dang, that's a gas, right? That's that high, that's that good. Well, no, it just has a lot to do with the trichome levels of when those plants were picked and what it's going to help produce when you're utilizing the plant. All right. So again, when we talk about some of the cannabinoids that are in there, and I want you guys to write some of these down and do your research, because for me, this was really important when I started researching more about the cannabinoids, because I wanted something like I really could not sleep. I was having a hard time sleeping, depending on the medication that they had me on during the time of my healing process. I wasn't eating, or I was eating too much. And so a lot of these different cannabinoids were really helpful in me figuring out the right balance to be able to get my body to relax. Because as you all understand and know, that when your body is in pain, it's just hard for it to relax. And CBD does help with that, but there's also other cannabinoids that you can utilize that will help with that. One of the things I always tell people is to look for full spectrum products. That means that it's going to have everything in the plant in those products, and that's going to help you give you a balance when it comes to the level of trichomes that you're going to get access to, and the therapeutic value that you're going to receive in those. All right. So let's talk about our endocannabinoid system. We all have them. Even our dogs have them. If you are pet parents like myself. And so what it is that it is a crucial molecular system that the body uses to help maintain homeostasis. And it consists of cannabinoid receptors and endocannabinoid molecules and their metabolic enzymes. And so what happens is anytime the body gets out of balance, right? So let's just say if you are not hydrated enough, right? So that means that the body is now out of balance, and so it's not in homeostasis. So the endocannabinoid system helps the body to maintain that, but CBD and the receptors that we have in our body, depending on whether you're using CBD or THC, can help bring those into balance. And so we know that there are at least two types of cannabinoid receptors, which is our CB1 and our CB2 receptors. And our CB1 receptors are present in the central nervous system. So when we're talking about our bodies in the central nervous system, that's going to be our spinal cord, it's going to be our adrenals, anything that has to do with our central nervous system, and it's activated by anandamide and or THC, and it's also reduced by CBD, right? So a lot of times when we were talking about the head high versus the body high, these receptors are what's turned on to help produce those within the body. And then we also have our CB2 receptors, which is found in our immune system, our GI tract, and our peripheral tissue. So that would be like our skin and our teeth and our lungs and our kidneys and our liver. And that is activated, the activation is reduced by CBD, but it can also be stimulated by CBD as well as THC. And so here's a visual representation of what that is. So when we talk about our CB1 receptors, right? So that's anything that's going to be found in our brain, our lungs, our vascular systems, our muscles, our GI tract, our reproductive organs, our immune system, our liver, our bone marrow, and our pancreas, right? So we understand that these are all major organs that we have within our body. And so whenever we use CBD or THC, these receptors are what's being activated to either reduce the pain that we're having, or bring that, whatever they can do to help bring that body back into homeostasis. homeostasis and bring it back into balance. And the same thing for our CB2 receptors, as it relates to our spleen, our bones, our skin, our immune system, our liver, our bone marrow, and our pancreas. And one of the things that I really want you guys to pay attention to in both of these is the bone marrow and the pancreas and the liver. We know that the liver is the largest detoxing organ in the body. We know that the bone marrow is responsible for producing the blood in the body. And we know that the pancreas is also responsible for balancing out our blood sugar and those things within our body. So we can understand how important it is for these receptors in our body and how CBD helps with those, especially for those of us who are suffering from diabetes, who suffer from arthritis, who suffer from acne, who suffer from all of these different medical conditions, and how these receptors play a big part in utilizing CBD. So I hope you guys are taking good notes. And if I'm going too fast or if you have any questions, please be sure to put them in the chat, because I want to make sure that this information is going to help you in your journey and understanding and utilizing cannabis. So let's talk about the laws, right? Because we understand the medical side, we understand the history of it, but what are the laws as it relates to cannabis? Because I know for me here in Texas, we are a medical state only, and which means that you have to have a qualifying condition to be able to utilize the plant. So in the chat, if you don't mind, just go ahead and list some of the states where you all are meeting us from today. And let's see if your states are listed as a medical state, or if you are a recreational state, or maybe your state may not even be, there may not even be any policies in place for, okay, we got Colorado, Georgia, Washington. All right. Oklahoma. Okay, Michelle. Oklahoma. I'm from Oklahoma. So you guys definitely have a medical program. Washington, Georgia, Colorado, Florida. Medical only at the present for South Dakota, California. You guys are just trailblazers. Okay. So as you can see, yes, and make sure, yes, go and vote. India is not legal, but CBD is. Okay, perfect. Yes. So again, we can understand how important legalization is and how important getting out to vote is. And I highly encourage you all to, especially if you are a supporter of cannabis. I'm not here to do any political nothing in terms of getting you to vote one way or another, but definitely pay attention to the laws in your state as it relates to cannabis use. Definitely pay attention to the taxes that are being used from that money, from the purchases. Pay attention to where that money goes, because it's one thing to have it legalized in your state, but what are those funds going to? What are they helping with? Because we definitely want to make sure that it's being used for, for a good cause, right? Here in Texas, I hope and pray soon that we at least get to a full medical state where it's not based on any qualifying conditions, because we have one of the largest medical centers here in the world at the Houston Medical Center, for cancer, for research, for a whole lot of things. And I think it's really, imperative that at least we get some different policies and procedures in place as it relates, especially for those who are suffering from different ailments, and cannabis can definitely help them. But of course, like most states, they want to know how much money they can make off of it first. So let's talk about it from a federal standpoint. We know that there's currently 46 states in the US with some sort of medical cannabis law, despite the fact that cannabis is still illegal under federal law. The US federal government regulates drugs through the Controlled Substance Act, and this statute does not recognize the difference between medical and recreational use of cannabis. And we also know that under the Controlled Substance Act, cannabis is classified as a Schedule I drug, okay? Which means that the federal government views cannabis as a highly addictive and having no medical value, which it just totally baffles me. But anyway, doctors may not prescribe cannabis for medical use Under the federal law, they can only recommend its use using the protection from the First Amendment. So for me, I do have a medical card here in Texas, and so when I go and I meet with a person, with the medical doctor, um, they can only recommend something to me. They can only say, well, based off of this, you can use up to 1% THC for your condition. And I'm being honest for you, 1% is, they might as well just give me that 0.3% that is legal under hemp, because it really does not help. But again, it's a step in the right direction. So for those of you who are in states where you have medical cannabis where you can get higher levels of THC, or if you're in states where it's recreational, you guys are in a better position as it relates to payment, you being able to use that plant for pain management. All right. So, in December 2018, Congress passed the Farm Bill Act, which allows for broad spanning hemp cultivation. So we know that in 2018, President Obama at that time allowed for hemp cultivation. And so a lot of states then started growing hemp, and Texas, fortunately, is one of those places now where we can grow hemp. But if you get a hot crop, that whole crop has to be burned, which means that none of the crop can be more than 0.3% THC when it's tested. And for those of you who don't understand what that means that when they go in and test, if it's over 0.3%, that means that that whole crop has to be disposed of, even if it's 1 point over, right? So just imagine growing a whole field of hemp and then it has to be destroyed because it tested hot, right? And so it also has to do with the ability to be able to transport those products, and it also has to be able to transport those products over Texas lines. So any cannabis plant that contains more than 0.3% THC would be considered non-hemp cannabis marijuana under federal law, and they would not face any legal, well, they would thus face no legal protection under the Farm Bill. So that means that if it's over that amount, then they would not be protected under the Farm Bill that was passed by Congress in 2018. All right, so a couple of more legal points as it relates to the plant. So we've all heard of RICO charges, right? Which is a federal law that's designed to combat organized crime in the United States. And we know that before this plant became legal, we know, like everything else, it had a underground market. And so when we talk about the implications of this plant and how it has now thrusted forward, there are still opportunities for federal implications in utilizing this plant if it's not done correctly. And racketeering charges or RICO charges are one of those. The Safe Banking Act, which enables banks and credit unions to provide core banking service to cannabis-related businesses. There are still some banks that will not allow cannabis businesses to bank with them, right? So it does not matter that you have a legal business, you're in a legal state. Federally, those banks, they don't have to accept your money, right? So now that's why you have a heavy cash industry, which now sets up these businesses to, be robbed, and which we'll discuss later when we talk about the business side of it. Then we also have the Cole memo, which directs the Department of Justice not to prosecute individuals and companies who comply with state legalized programs. So when it comes to different states, every state is going to have their own specific legalization program to be able to comply, for the businesses to be able to comply for those licenses. And so any state that has a legal program, they're going to have the laws and regulations in place. And so compliance is very important. That's one of the areas that I deal a lot with, is in compliance, because in order for us to make this correctly, we have to have compliance and standard operation in place to be able to operate our businesses. We can't just be out here like it was back in the day, rolling around in our car and putting it in Ziploc bags and handing it to our people. No, those days are long gone. Like, you have to have compliant packaging, you have to have a compliant business plan. So the Cole memo is what is out to make sure that these businesses in these different states comply with those state mandated programs. And then we have the Rauschenberg-Farr Amendment, which prohibits the Department of Justice from spending money to interfere with state medical cannabis laws, which means that because each state now has their own laws um, as it relates to their medical program, then the Department of Justice cannot come in and say what they can and cannot do with that money, which I believe is very, very important. So then we also have the MORE Act, which is the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment Expungement. And so this has to do with cannabis reform, right? And so a lot of times, and one of the things that I want us to understand is that although this cannabis industry is now becoming legal, there still have been a lot of people who have been incarcerated behind this plant. Right. And so one of the things that now many of these states are doing, because they are legalizing it in those states, is making sure that those people who have been affected by it now receive some type of expungement. And they also have the opportunity to be able to now gain a license in that industry. But what happens is a lot of times they may qualify for that license, but then they may not have the money to be able to maintain that license. So what happens is a lot of these larger companies will come in and partner with those individuals to help them maintain that license, but then they want to maintain more control of the ownership of those businesses. So now it's still a criminal industry when I when I look at it, because a lot of times these business owners, they're just on the license for the sake of having the license in that state so that business can operate. But some of the key points is it can completely decriminalize marijuana at the federal level by removing it as a controlled substance. So that's one of the things that we definitely want to happen. It requires the federal government to review and potentially expunge previous or current cannabis offense convictions. And we know that in a lot of states now, again, there's still people behind jail for less than a gram of marijuana, right? But then you have businesses that are operating that have massive amounts of cannabis. So, like, how do we right the wrong for those who have been convicted? How do we push to get these expungements for those individuals who are currently serving time for utilizing and or distribution of a plant that now we say is legal to utilize because they can tax it in that state? And then it would establish a 5% federal tax on marijuana that would be used to fund the newly created Opportunity Trust Fund. I'm still researching more on how that fund money is being dispersed. So definitely something I'm looking more into, because I want to know how that money is really being utilized for those people who have had a criminal conviction, and how that expungement, those monies are being used to help them. And so for any of you who work in taxes or are tax professionals, the tax code 280E, it forbids businesses from deducting otherwise ordinary business expenses from gross income associated with trafficking of Schedule 1 or Schedule 2 substances as defined by the Controlled Substance Act. So when you get ready to file your taxes as a cannabis business, this is the tax code that they're going to utilize, because they want to make sure that you're not just using a bunch of business expenses to write off, especially as it relates to the products in your business. All right, so this is just a little bit of Texas law, and I highly encourage you all to do the research in your states. But I put this in because when it comes to states like Texas, with us only having a medical program for those who have qualifying conditions, a lot of people are now going into hemp production, right? Because that's one of the ways that they can still get into the market. And then once Texas comes with a medical program, then it's just a matter of converting that crop into a crop that can be grown for medicinal purposes. So here in Texas, we can grow hemp. And for those of you who may be in states or countries where it's not legal, these are just some of the other things that you can look into as it relates to the Department of Agriculture and what the Department of Agriculture has in place for your state as it relates to hemp products. And they state that you cannot sell hemp flower for smoking. This is one of the things that they had started back in August of last year, but I believe that they have now, I think in February, March of this year, they have now released that to where you can now utilize, you can now sell hemp flower here in Texas for smoking purposes. All right, so definitely something you want to pay attention to if you are in a state that does not have a medical or a recreational program. So let's talk about the health benefits, right? So we've talked about the laws, we've talked about, the history of the plant, we've talked about the different health aspects of the plant and the CB1 receptors and your CB2 receptors. So now let's talk about the benefits of cannabis or marijuana. So, according to the National Institute of Health, manipulating the endocannabinoid system by introducing external cannabinoids like CBD can be useful in treating a variety of medical ailments, including so those of us like myself, I have pain. I have severe nerve pain as a result of both of the surgeries that I have received. So I do utilize CBD on a daily basis for that. If you know anybody that has epilepsy, MS, ALS, Parkinson's, inflammation, a lot of us that have HS, we have inflammation in our body, acne, PTSD, psoriasis, if you get broken bones or even mad cow disease, CBD is very beneficial for that. If you have any bacterial infections, diabetes, arthritis, nausea, anxiety, ADHD, schizophrenia, substance abuse, even withdrawal from substance abuse, heart disease, IBS, or depression. These are just some of the benefits of utilizing CBD that can help with these ailments. So like I said, I use it on a daily basis just for the pain, just to help manage my pain. Because I'm telling you, some days I'm on a 10, some days I'm at a 5, some days I don't have any pain. It just kind of depends. I always tell you, kind of like my grandparents used to say, the weather, if it's gonna rain, my body is gonna tell me. So, but yeah, so for any of you who may currently have somebody or know somebody who suffers for this, definitely talk to them about the possibility of utilizing CBD to help with that. Again, I'm no medical doctor, it's just a recommendation. So some of the things that we know about CBD and hemp and cannabis is that there are nutritional benefits in utilizing the plant. Hemp seeds, right? You can get those at your grocery store. Hemp oil have very good essential fatty acids. They are rich in them. I add them to my salads when I cook, or I add them to my smoothies, and they are a good source of protein. And I am plant-based, so for me, this is just a good way for me to get those good essential fatty acids. We also know that the highest concentration of the cannabinoids in the hemp or the cannabis plant is found in the flowers or the buds. And I also utilize the leaves. So whenever I find a vendor that has the leaves, I also utilize the leaves, right? Because those have a lot of good nutrients in them also. Um, the FDA does not recognize THC or CBD as a dietary supplement, which I think is kind of sad, but that's my own personal opinion. The best therapeutic ways to get the benefits of the cannabis and the hemp plant is through ingestion. I know a lot of people like to smoke. I used to be a smoker because for me, I was able to get relief a lot faster. But ingestion is the best way if you are going to be using it for medicinal purposes, because it allows the body an opportunity to process it in a better way through ingestion than if you were to inhale the smoke. Not saying that inhaling the smoke, that's personal preference, but if you are looking to use it for medicinal purposes, ingestion is going to be the best way. Raw cannabis. Listen, y'all, if you can come across some good raw cannabis, it is so beneficial, especially if you can find it in a hashish form, which we discussed earlier, because it's going to have all those good trichomes, that hashish that they were talking about. That's just the sticky part of the plant, that the trichomes, it produces like a sticky tackiness. And so that's where a lot of the nutrition is when we talk about the raw part of the cannabis. And some of the ways that you can get it through ingestion is by creating oils, butters. Eating the raw plant is the best way. And then some people also utilize it, as a gummy or as a tincture. So let's talk about the health and the social impacts of the plant, right? So when we talk about this, we hear a lot about tobacco deaths. We hear a lot about alcohol deaths. We hear a lot about illegal drug deaths, which I think now illegal drugs and legal drug deaths are on the rise, because believe it or not, the practice of medicine is just that, right? We have a lot of deaths that result in misapplication or misdiagnosis, and then these drugs are being prescribed, which can lead to death, right? And same thing with illegal drugs. We know that right now fentanyl deaths are on the rise. Caffeine deaths, believe it or not, yes, you can die from too much caffeine. Drink one of those monster drinks too many times, and it's not a good thing. Same thing with aspirin. A lot of people, especially those who deal with pain, take a lot of aspirin, and it literally will impact your liver and your kidneys. Now, I don't know of any marijuana deaths. There may be some associated with it, like if a person drives, but actually dying from the use of marijuana, we're good. All right. So let's talk about the risk, the marijuana risk. We know that contrary to popular belief, marijuana can and is addictive, to some people. And research shows that 1 in 6 people who start using the drug before the age of 18 can become addicted. Now, I don't want anybody in here to tell on themselves when they had their first joint or gummy, but when we talk about our youth, right, it's more prevalent now in our younger generations than it was, in our older generation. I used to, like I stated earlier, be a police officer, and I worked in the school district. And believe it or not, most of the arrests that we had, when they would come to juvenile processing, were cannabis related charges. Right. And so we know that it is in our schools. We know that that's just one of the many things that are in our school. But when we talk about our youth under the age of 18, we understand that it is important to start educating our children about this plant. It is important to educate our children about all drugs, right? Because what happens is when we don't educate them, their friends start to educate them. I have a 17-year-old now. I've been in this industry for going on 6 years, and I started educating him about it at 12, because in middle school, believe it or not, people are already telling him about it. Okay. And so I had to be proactive in the education that I was going to provide him, so that he was aware of what not to take, right? Because, hey, I got this gummy. He don't know if it's a regular, gummy worm, or if it's a gummy worm that has CBD in it, or if it's a gummy worm that has THC in it. And so I had to start educating him about not taking anything from anyone. Like, don't just take it because your friend is offering it to you. Um, we've seen on the news where several kids have gotten sick by eating brownies because somebody brought it to school, and they don't know what's wrong with them until you have a group of kids whose heart is racing, their eyes are bloodshot, or they're vomiting or throwing up, because they have ingested a large amount of cannabis, and nobody can explain why, other than the fact that they took something that they were not supposed to. So we definitely want to start educating our children about it, as well as adults, right? Because we understand that 1 in 10 adults who use the drug can also become addicted. I admit, at one point, I was every day I was using it, right? Because the amount of pain that I was in, but I also understood that for me, I did not want to go back to the pain medication that my pain doctor was prescribing me. right? Because that medication, the side effects of that were a lot worse to me on my liver and my different organs than what cannabis was going to be to me as a natural herb in my body. So that was just my own personal um, journey in using the plant and coming off some of those medications. Now I can proudly say that I don't have to take anything for my pain management, but I do use CBD daily to help maintain um, help help me to maintain the level of pain that I may feel as a result of just having nerve damage. And so when we talk about the social impacts of cannabis, right? Again, I talked earlier about, we have individuals who have been arrested for this plant, right? And a lot of times when it's destigmatized for the community, now we have to advocate and educate for record expungement. Because what happens is, I like to use this analogy of the bracelets, right? We have two bracelets. One is the person who is still being arrested for this plant, and the bracelets that they receive as handcuffs. And then we also have the individual who now is an entrepreneur or a business mogul in the industry, and their bracelet is tied to a briefcase because they're on their way to the bank, right? And so when we talk about this, we have to really get out and advocate for those individuals who are still being locked up behind this plant. Because what happens is when you have these individuals who are allowed to make money on top of money, and there's nothing that's going back to help those who have been incarcerated behind it, it's really kind of unfair to those who literally have tried to pave the way for those of us who are now being able to enjoy it. The other thing that we talk about in social impact is revenue for vacant and dormant and low producing crops and land. Um, Many times, if we drive through our communities, we see vacant lots, right? Here in Houston, we have, believe it or not, as big as Houston is, we still have food deserts where we have communities who may only have access to one grocery store, right? Or we have vacant land that's not being utilized that could be used for community gardens, which is one of the things I strongly advocate for. And then also, the myth behind the plant, right? Because a lot of times it's being called a drug, but we also know that with the legalization of the plant, there's going to be an increase of crime, right? Because those businesses are now cash businesses. So individuals are now looking at them as a target, especially in those same communities where they don't have access to food. They don't have access to, proper grocery stores. And so when we look at this, we want to make sure that the legalization in our communities is being done right, where it reduces harm, where our children are still not in danger. And we definitely want to make sure that there's some type of education surrounding the plant, as well as new jobs and skill training, right? Because again, this is a business, right? The cannabis industry is a business. And I always tell people, anything that you do outside of cannabis can be done in the cannabis industry. So if you're an accountant, you can be a cannabis accountant. If you are a social media person, then guess what? That same skill can be transferred into the cannabis industry. So we still want to be able to make sure that people have access to jobs and skills training, that our children are made aware of what's happening in their communities, that people now have access to be able to have food in those communities, as well as expungement for those who have been affected by it. Now, let's talk about the money, right? Um, when we talk about this industry, we know that it is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Somebody put billion in the chat, okay? Somebody could put billion, and I want to know, how many $1 billion do you think this industry currently makes? Anybody? How much money do you think is currently being made in the cannabis industry? I'm just curious. Let me see your numbers. Billions. Yes. Come on, Tanya. Yes, Brandley. Yes, 1 billion. Okay, 20 billion, 100 billions, right? So we know that this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. We know that there is medical benefits. We know that there's criminalization in the industry, and we know that there's also social equity in the industry, right? And I challenge you all to look up the Illinois Adult Use Cannabis and Social Equity Act. This is one of the states that has decided that if you are going to utilize cannabis or be a business in this in their state, you have to have a social equity program, and it has to give back to those who have been affected by the use of cannabis. So, the business, let's talk about the business, because again, we know that it is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and we know that this industry has a lot of moving parts, right? So we know that there's the retail part of the industry. We know that there's cultivation. So for those of you who like to grow, manufacturing, if you're one of those people that say, you know what, put me in the lab and let me figure out something to make out of this plant, or if you're the processing, or if you are an ancillary business, we know that there's different parts of this industry that all go in to make up this industry. So again, it's no different than the food industry, believe it or not. And I always challenge people to think of it as a food industry, because the same laws that apply to our food industry, a lot of those laws still apply in the cannabis industry. So beware of your laws in the federal, state, and on the local level. And I do have a slide in here to answer your guys' question on how much the billions are. But let's talk about risk management, right? Because I've been talking about the plant, I've been talking about all the benefits of it, but what are the risks, right? Because as a business owner or as a consumer, when you go into a business, there is always going to be a risk associated with the products that you use, right? So we understand that yes, we can now have access to these, but what are the people who are making these products? What are the compliance levels that they have to go through to make sure that they're producing and distributing a good, safe product, right? Because nothing is worse than going and getting your product, getting home and getting sick. That, I'm telling you, you do not want to go through that. So part of it is making sure that there's good business management and making sure that there's compliance that these businesses are operating under so that they can deliver a good, strong product. So when we talk about risk management, we want to make sure that they identify those potential risks. We want to make sure that they're monitoring and reviewing those risks, that they're treating those risks, they're evaluating those risks, and they're analyzing. And so imagine you go to a store, right? And you go in, and while you're in the store, you purchase a pack of gummies, right? And everything looks okay, right? But then when you walk out the store and you try them, something just don't smell right, or you taste it and then all of a sudden you're not feeling well. Well, when you look at those plants, one of the things that each product has to have is what's called a certificate of analysis. And that certificate of analysis is going to explain to you all the testing that was done on that plant, if there was any pesticides on that plant, if there was any mold that was found in that plant. So you definitely want to make sure that you are getting compliant product. Please do not get your product from a gas station. Like, I'm sorry, please don't. Don't just, if it's not from a store that you can verify what that certificate of analysis is stating, and you can ask for that as a consumer when you go into these stores, ask them, do you have a certificate of analysis that shows me the testing that was done on these products? Because anybody can come up with a product these days. Somebody put in the chat, white labeling is rampant. Yes, it is. And so you want to make sure that you're getting compliant product. So when it comes to this, to utilizing plant, that's one of your rights as a consumer, is to make sure that you're getting good quality product. And so some of the key risk management considerations for the cannabis industry is crime and security, right? Imagine going into a store to get your favorite product and somebody bust in there and hold the place up, right? Because it is definitely possible. So when you're going in these locations, a lot of them now will now require you to show your driver's license before they'll even let you into the back, right? They'll take a picture of it. You're going to notice a lot of cameras in and around the facility. The product liability, again, that's where you verifying that the products that you're receiving have been tested. For the workers, is workers' compensation available? Because after inhaling a lot of those, if they're a trimmer or a bud processor, there is risk associated with working in the cannabis space. Cash management, right? Because you're going to be intaking a lot of cash. That is a heavy cash business, okay? So you want to make sure that you have procedures and policies in place to handle that. Auto liability. There's now some businesses that will actually transport your product to you. Okay, so you definitely, and even if you are in logistics, if you are handling the transportation of these products, which is why, you know, when you go to the airport, they want to make sure you don't have no product on you. If you're shipping it through FedEx or UPS, they want to know all of that because there is a liability associated with transporting those products. Regulatory compliance. What are the regulations in place for the products that are being made? You know, how long is the shelf life? What is the due dates? So none of this changes. Again, you want to look at this just as you would the food industry as it relates to compliance. And then business continuity and interruption. A lot of us experienced some things that happened during COVID, right? And so, you know, just imagine the businesses that either had to shut down or close or that were interrupted either by COVID, or if there's a break-in, or if you have a issue with a product, you know, a lot of things cease. How are you going to still be able to maintain and operate your business with an interruption? So some of the risk manage the target segments in the industry, we know that there is we're not trying to use the industry, though we're trying to manage our use of it. Yes. So when it comes to dispensaries, right? Cultivators, the landlords, we know that they are going to be responsible. So if you open up a facility, they want to know what you're going to be doing. Testing laboratories, processors, manufacturers, extractors, and ancillary businesses. We know that these are all businesses that are tied into you being able to get access to your product. So even for these industries, they do have to have insurance. They have to have property insurance. They have to have product liability. They also have to have those SOPs in place. So if you are looking to even get into the business of cannabis, these are just some of the things that you would need to take into consideration as a business owner. And so one of the things I always tell people is to do your research, right? Get a professional, somebody that can help you in this space, which is part of what I do as a consultant. Part of my job is to help you understand the market, help you understand the funding resources that are out there, help you to understand the business plan, your security plan when it comes to starting your business and the development of your business. Because one of the things that I want you all to think about, even when you go to your local person, right? Because some people may still do underground market, right? But even still, there is still a risk associated with even getting product underground, right? Because you may not have access to it in your state, or, you know, your local person may just be a lot cheaper than it is when you go to a dispensary. So you definitely want to think about these things when you're utilizing this plant and how you're utilizing it, because you want to make sure that you're at the end of the day getting safe products. That's my biggest thing. I want people to understand that you want to have good, clean, safe products. There's nothing is more important to me than making sure that you have good, clean, safe products. And so that's what this whole part of it is about, is that as the consumer, you have rights to utilizing this plant. You have a responsibility also to utilizing this plant, to making sure that you are doing your due diligence in terms of what you're using, where you're getting it from, and how you utilize the plant. And so for those who are interested, again, I always say get a guide, right? Nothing is worse than trying to get out here and figure out how to either use the plant, work in the industry, or become a business owner, and you have nobody to help guide you to figure it out. So whether you are wanting to learn how to use the plant in a safe way so that you can use it for pain management, if you're trying to figure out how to get started in the business because you have a background in growing, or if you're urban gardeners, or whatever the background is, or whatever your industry is, always get someone to help you figure this out. Because again, it's still an industry that has now become legal, but there's still a black market associated with it. Okay. And people will still utilize any means necessary, especially now, to make money. And they'll do it the easiest and the best way possible, especially for those of us who have no prior knowledge about what's going on or how to even make sure that you're getting access to good product. So, if you are interested in learning more about it, the one thing I will tell you is to educate yourself about the plant and the industry. There's certificate programs out. There's now colleges and universities that are now offering education about cannabis, and they have different certifications and master's programs now. Network, get out and network, especially if you are in a state where it's legal. Get out and network as much as possible with other people. Attend events on a regular basis. Decide the segment of the industry that you want to pursue as a consultant or anything. If you are already, like I said, a tax professional, it's just easy to transition over into the cannabis space if that's something you're interested in. So back to the question that I asked earlier about how many billions, let's talk about the money, right? So in the hemp industry, we know that it is legal in all 50 states. And so when we look at the hemp on a global level, we know that it is a $4.6 billion industry as of 2019. All right. And it's an 820 million industry domestically as of 2017. But we also know that there is high utility and sustainability in this industry. When it comes to marijuana, we know that it is a $43.7 billion industry on a global level. Guys, $43.7 billion. Okay. And so we also know that in the US, it's 33.6 billion. So again, we're talking about a high revenue industry when it comes to the product. So if you are interested in it, again, this is definitely an opportunity for those of us who are looking at how to either grow or expand our businesses. If you are a business owner, or if it's something that you're considering, this is just some of the things that you would need to take into consideration as a business owner. So let's talk about the cultivation process, right? We know that the first thing that has to go on with the plant is that we have to have a seed, right? We have to grow that seed. That seed has to flower. We have to cultivate it and harvest it. We have to dry it. We have to trim it. We have to cure it. We have to package it. And then we do the post processing. And then the cycle starts again. So this is pretty much the cycle that your plant is going to go through before it even comes to you. So it's going to exchange hands several times before it even gets to your local dispensary for you to be able to utilize it for medicinal purposes. So again, you guys heard me reference earlier about it being the perfect flower, and that is because every part of the cannabis plant is usable. Okay. Historically, cannabis has been bred by humans for three distinct purposes: for the fiber, which can be used. If you look at um, some of the old U.S. history, it was used as part of the U.S. flag. Many plantations had to grow hemp for the soldiers. Okay, they had to use it because they were utilizing it for different things during the wars, even for the seeds. Right, we know that the seeds are very beneficial. If you go to the stores now, you can get hemp seeds. Right, we use those for food. And they have a lot of rich oil and protein content. And then also for cultivars, because they are used for therapeutic benefits. So when we think about this plant, those are just some of the things that it is used for. When we talk about growing this plant, we know that this plant can grow in 26 weeks. Okay, 26 weeks. Now, when we talk about trees, right, because again, we talked about it in terms of textiles, we know that a tree takes anywhere from 10 to 20 years before it's mature. Well, we're talking about a plant that in 26 weeks can be grown and harvested um, and utilized. So we're talking about something that can be done a lot quicker in terms of utilizing it for food, for fiber, and for medicine. All right. So 26 weeks compared to 10 years, 20 years for a plant. So some of the ways that your plants are grown is outdoors. We know that outdoors is going to expose the plants to the elements. So typically when we talk about it, hemp or industrial hemp, it is grown outdoors. When we're talking about greenhouse grow, that is going to be for both hemp and for cannabis. And then most cannabis is grown indoors. Now, the difference between the two of those is one is grown mostly for the elements, whereas the other one is going to be manipulated. So when you grow indoors, they're going to regulate the lights. They're going to regulate the AC units. They're going to regulate the nutrients that is being set up. Versus growing outdoors where the elements or where the natural elements are being allowed to use and grow the plants. All right, so we know that when it comes to propagation, we know that we have seeds is one of the ways that our plants are grown. And then we also have clones, right? And so if you are interested in growing your own products, make sure that you get feminized seeds or you want to look for female plants, okay? The male plants are they're good if you want to use them for like juicing or if you want to use the leaves for to eat or to make teas out of. But if you want to use the plant to grow, to be able to germinate, you definitely want to look for feminized or female seeds. And again, when we're talking about cloning, you want to make sure that if you do find a vendor that clones for you, you want to make sure that they're cloning feminized seeds, okay? Because if they grow you a bunch of male seeds, you're not going to get good flowers. You're not going to get any buds, okay? So definitely something to consider when you're looking at it. So how do you know when your plant is ready, right? You got your seeds, you're ready to harvest. So how do you know when your plants are ready? Generally, you'll know by those sticky trichomes, those that first slide that I showed you a few back, where it shows you the different colors. And so that's how you will know when your plant is ready, when it's a milky color. And that the trichome or the it's kind of a tacky feel. When you put your fingers together, it kind of gives you a little tacky resistance. Then you'll know it's time to harvest. And so once your plant is ready to harvest, you want to make sure that those trichomes, because again, that's where the good medicine is. You want to make sure that you haven't over processed it or it's at an amber or an over cloudy state. Overexposure can degrade the cannabinoids and the terpenes, and then that will lose the medicinal benefits of your plant. So you definitely want to make sure that you pay attention to the harvesting. Same thing with the drying. You definitely want to dry the plant out. So if you go to your local dispensary and your plants are not dry, then they can set up mold. Okay, so you want to make sure that they are processing these plants properly and even down to trimming, right? Because you want to make sure that there was no extra leaves. You want to make sure that there was no bugs in there. So you want to pay attention to all of these things. And these are questions that you can ask now that you've attended this class. You'll be able to say, you know, what was the drying process like? What was the trimming process like? Because these are things that you want to know about your perfect flower. So we talked about this earlier when we talked about packaging. Anytime that you go to a dispensary, those packages have to be child proof. They have to be child resistant so that children cannot get into them. They have to be properly labeled with the information about what that product contains. So when you go to your dispensary, it's going to tell you your terpene profile. It's going to tell you when it was tested. It's going to tell you the results. All of that information is going to be on there. But the most important thing here is going to be this label that says THC, okay? Because if there's THC in that product, that they do have to indicate that that is in there, and it has to be compliant packaging. So for those of you who say, you know what, Tamara, I don't know if I can get into this industry. Well, guess what? If you don't do nothing else but learn how to package, you can get involved in this industry, okay? Because again, they're always looking for different products to make sure that they are compliant with what the state recommends that those bottles and packaging have, so that they are child proof. But the main thing is that they have to be child proof and they have to be labeled. So again, when we talk about the uses of this plant, we know it has over 50,000 uses, okay? So these are just some of the uses of the plant. The stalk can be used for fiber. It can be used for building materials. It can be used for paper. It can be used for animal bedding. The roots can be used for medicine. It can also be used for organic compost. The leaves can be used for animal bedding. It could be used for compost as well as medicine. And then we also know that the seeds can be used for oil, can be used for food, can be used for bedding, can be used for milk. You know, we've all heard of hemp milk. So there's different uses as to this plant. So get out there and explore, right? Get out there and explore all the different uses of the plant. So you briefly heard me talk about the plant itself. So we have the seeds, which are here at the top. You have your leaves and your flowers here. You also have your stalk, which is here, which is also used for fiber or hurd. So this is the stalk, and then of course the roots, okay? So when you hear somebody talk about the different parts of the plant, the leaves can be made for teas, the fiber, you know, you've heard of rope, you can use it for t-shirts, for shoes, for different things, as well as the roots can be used for medicine. The roots are really used for medicine because it has, that's where the nutrients are in the plant. That's where most of them are. And then of course you, like I said, the seeds part of it. All right, so what should you look for when it comes to your products, right? So you wanna make sure that they're premium quality. I always suggest vegan products, okay? I'm not a big fan of the strawberry flavored, you know, tinctures. I'm not a big fan of, you know, pineapple, because those to me are extra additives, and they're also extra chemicals or coloring. So for me, I'm always looking for vegan products. You want to make sure that they're lab tested. You want to make sure that they're non-GMO. You want to make sure that they're third party tested and they're organically grown. You want to make sure that you're getting access to good quality products, okay? So what are some good ways to use cannabis? All right, so the first one is smoke. This is what most people commonly do when it comes to the plant. They smoke it. You also have your edibles. This can be done in the gummy forms, chocolates, brownies. They have capsules that you can utilize for cannabis or hemp or CBD. They have topicals. I commonly use pain topicals to help with my pain management. We also have vapes. Vapes are real popular right now. Their CBD drinks or THC drinks are now on the rise, as well as tinctures. And when it comes to using tinctures, one of the things that I always like to tell people is that a tincture, when you take it, you will take it and put it up under your tongue, and you're going to hold it for 60 seconds. And that's going to help to break the blood-brain barrier a lot quicker than if you were to ingest it. So think along the lines of taking like a BC powder, right? You know, when you take a BC powder and it, you know, it kind of quickly takes the pain away. Well, taking tinctures have the same effects. So when you use a tincture, this is primarily the way that you would use it, is just to hold it under the tongue 60 seconds, swallow, and there you go. So we are almost done. I thank you all for those who have stayed with us. I do offer free 15-minute consultations if you are interested in getting a consultation to help you with your cannabis management. I also offer 1 hour consultations. I do continuing education, monthly networking events, and I highly encourage you to tell a friend if you know somebody who could benefit from this information. Tell somebody, because that's what we're here for. So I will now open it up to any questions, comments, or concerns. Brandley, are you there?
Yeah,
Oh, there
coming
you
back
are.
in. Hold on, sorry, one sec. All right, so we had a couple of questions, one of which was, what's the distinction between habit and addiction?
So for me, I think the biggest distinction would be whether or not your usage, right? And I think that's something that they're really closely intermingled, but at the same time, I don't feel like they are. Because I had a habit of using it every day, but I wasn't addicted to it because I could make myself stop. It's an addiction when you are going above and beyond to make sure that you get access to it. You're doing any and everything. You can't function throughout the day without it. So I did have a habit of utilizing daily, but it wasn't an addiction. So
Okay.
to me, that would be the biggest distinction that I would be able to tell somebody.
And then Dayasha asked, she said, I'm currently Hurley stage 3 and started adalimumab or Humira injection course from 2021 and have been suggested to avoid smoking. Doctors asked me if I smoke, but I told them I don't smoke tobacco, but I used to smoke weed when I was in Canada and used CBD oil, and all of them helped me to control the pain and work at ease. But they said no to everything in India. I don't understand why. I can barely sleep with all of the prescribed antibiotic and painkillers.
Dasha, I completely understand. Like, I completely understand. Pain management, again, was why I got into cannabis because the amount of medication that my pain management doctor, like, I literally had a pain management doctor outside of my regular doctor. And I could go in, and if I told them my pain was at a 10, they would give me any medication that I wanted. But when I asked them about utilizing cannabis for pain management, I was told no, right? But that was what was working. Because I was becoming more addicted to the pain, to the medication that I was using, to the point to where, I'll just be honest, like those side effects of those medications are real. Okay. And I was experiencing a lot of those side effects. And when I asked about an alternative, a lot of times the only alternative I was given was a lesser dosage. Okay. And so what I would suggest is, doing your own research. Don't let this be the only, conversation, or don't let this be the only training that you get about it. Definitely learn your body, right? Because at the end of the day, this is your temple, and you know best how, like, I always tell people, we are our own best physicians. For me, I had to change what I was eating. I had to change a lot of my thought process. I had to change my environment, because I then realized that a lot of what I was experiencing, first started with my thought process. And then it also started with what I was putting into my mouth, right? And once I learned how to stop eating, certain foods, like I quit eating nightshades because nightshades was a big trigger for me. I love potatoes, right? But potatoes was a big trigger. Tomatoes were a big trigger. So once I started removing those foods from my diet, and I eat according to my blood type. Some people don't believe in that, but I wholeheartedly believe in it because I realized that a lot of the foods that I was eating were triggers for my HS. And once I learned how to manage that, a lot of my symptoms went away, and so did my pain. So did the inflammation. So did the flare ups. And then I was able to help control the thoughts that I was having about myself and about my body. Because a lot of times, the thoughts that we start having, it has to do with what we are in our current state. And so, one of the things I always tell people is that we have to see ourselves through where we currently are. Okay, because if you cannot see yourself past where you currently are, then you're going to stay where you are. So for me, those would just be some suggestions, and I would love to, talk with you further about this outside of this conversation if you're open to it, because I've been there. Okay, I can tell you I've been there, but I've gotten through it. I'm currently in remission, and the only time I have flare-ups is if I sneak that little sweet treat every once in a while that I know I'm not supposed to have. But I pay for it, right? And I know I have to get myself back on track. So I hope that answered.
Perfect. Thank you. So what do you recommend for people who like have not tried cannabis at all and who may
Mhm,
not, be wanting to smoke, let's say? What would you
mhm.
recommend that people who are interested in trying cannabis but have not yet, kind of taken that step and don't want to smoke, what would you recommend for them?
I would recommend starting with CBD. Okay. I would recommend a tincture. I would recommend a gummy. There are medical grade tinctures that are out there that have a high level of CBD. I would recommend anything over 500 milligrams up for dosage. And again, this is just my personal recommendation, but CBD, if you take it and you use it as a maintenance, it will help you tremendously. Now, this is what I always have to tell people: you can't take it one time and expect it to work. That's just, that's just not how it happens. You have to continuously do it because you have to understand that it's getting into those receptors and it's trying to bring the body back into homeostasis. When we experience pain, our body is out of balance. Something in our body is telling us, hey, something over here is not right. Right. So homeostasis is bringing that body back into balance, and CBD is the best way to do that. Gummies, CBD gummies are good. CBD tinctures are good. I would stay away from some of the drinks only because of the sugar content. And I know for me, sugar is a trigger. But anything in terms of a tincture or gummies, those I would highly recommend you to utilize to get started.
And what if someone wants to add THC into that regimen? What would you recommend? How would they start with THC?
So, what I would recommend for those of you who are interested is to learn about the entourage effect. The entourage effect is where you utilize THC and CBD together, and we didn't discuss it, but it's where you put them at a 1-to-1 ratio. So let's just say if you are going to use CBD, you want to make sure that you use an equal amount of THC to be able to balance it. So the CBD helps with the medicinal part of it, and the THC will help with the pain part of it. So while the medicine is working, the THC is going to help you with the pain. That's going to help you sleep better. It's going to help bring that appetite either into control, or it's going to either help you get hungry, or it's going to help to lessen that. If you're having nausea from your medication, it's going to help to lessen those. But as far as the exact amount of THC, again, that's where a consultation would be important, because I would need to ask a lot more questions as to what you have going on. But definitely using both of those together is going to give you the best effect.
And let's talk about the ways that people can use THC, right?
Mhm.
So you can and even like you were mentioning THC and CBD equally. So is that in a gummy form as well? I mean, what other ways can people ingest that?
Yes. So a lot of tinctures are now being sold with CBD and THC. So you may have some tinctures that say 500 milligrams of CBD and 2 milligrams of um, THC, right? So that's kind of like a 1-to-1 ratio. So you want to look for something that's a 1-to-1 ratio or a 2-to-1 ratio, which means that it's going to have a little bit more THC, that's going to help you with that pain, but it's still going to give you the medicinal benefits of the CBD. I highly recommend starting with a tincture, because that can be measured, right? Because anytime you use a tincture, it's going to come with a dropper. And based on the instructions and the amount that's in there, I can give a recommendation. With gummies, I always tell people, I don't care what the bottle says, start with half. Start with half, because if you try to go in with a whole, I
Or if
made that
you're me,
mistake.
start with a quarter. Yeah.
Or start with a card. Like, just don't go in, and please do not take more than one because you feel like it's not working. Typically, it takes about 30 minutes to an hour of ingestion time for that edible to work. So a lot of people be like, "Well, nothing happened." Well, and then 2 hours later, you laid out somewhere trying to figure out how you how you got there.
Yeah.
So definitely start low and slow. And again, with a personal consultation, I would be able to provide more insight. But tinctures and gummies, I always recommend for people who are getting started utilizing in that industry. I mean, getting utilized to start utilizing in the cannabis space. Smoking, for those of you who do smoke, I do also do the same recommendation. Mix a little CBD in with your THC, and it's going to still give you that balance. But if you currently suffer from HS, please know that you are going to have a higher risk from smoking of having a flare. Right. So if you want to reduce that flare, or those flares that you're going through, um, use a different alternative. I was a smoker because I knew that if I did, that pain would go away quickly. But then I also backed it up with taking some CBD so that once that smoke would kick in from, once everything would kick in, then I would have something to kind of maintain me until that gummy kicked in, because I knew I still had about 30 minutes to an hour. So it just depends. Now I just do a maintenance dose, and I'm able to control it that way. But when I have a day that I'm just hit me, I may even take a vape pen. I do have a CBD vape pen that I use also. So there's different methods. But if you're looking for a more medicinal use, ingestion is going to be the best way.
Okay. And then for those with where it's medically legal, I know for us in the state of Washington, it's easy to get a medical marijuana card. You can do it a lot of times over the phone or via a Zoom visit. So if you're in a lot of pain, you don't even have to go in. They do usually require a medical note as to what your diagnoses are. And having HS is a valid reason
Mhm.
to get a medical marijuana card as well. The other nice thing about that, and I don't know if this is across everywhere, so you can tell me if I'm on base or not, but it's much better when you go to a medical marijuana location, as far as what you're getting, and the price is unbelievably better with the fact
Mhm.
that you're not paying all of the taxes on it. So,
Right.
and is that the same across the board because it's medical or
Well, each state is going to vary,
okay.
but the good thing about going to getting a medical card is you're under a medical recommendation from that referring. Most times, it's going to be a referring physician.
Mhm.
And if you have any questions, they can provide you with one-on-one support. They can also give you a recommendation based off of your consultation with them. And they also have facilities that they work in conjunction with that they can recommend you to. When you go to these facilities, they're going to have a bud tender that should be educated about the ailments that you have. So if you go in and say, listen, I have a lot of pain, I'm not sleeping at night, what do you recommend? They should be able to point you directly to either some tinctures, some gummies, or some flour that you can utilize that will help you with that. Even when it comes to flour, because I still purchase flour, but I use it as a tea. I will make a tea out of it. So there's still so many uses that you can use, but definitely you want to make sure that the person that you're going to in your prospective states, when they're selling you that product, you want to make sure that they are educating you about it. They're educating you about how to use it. They're educating you about the risk of that, and then you also ask them, what are some things about this I should know? when was it last tested? You know, what is the compliance level? Tell me about the terpene profile. So these are things that you can ask when you go in to make your purchases, for sure.
And we've noticed in our own personal experience that people are very, very willing to help and educate, which is really a nice thing. So even though you walk in and you're just like, okay, I'm totally out of my element, we get a lot of people who are very happy to help. And they really
yeah.
want to help you find. So just speaking from somebody who it's not in my realm of understanding so much, but going in and having a medical card and asking the questions, it was very overwhelming at first, but then I felt very welcomed by everybody who was there. So you may feel out of place at first, but you do belong there, and just ask people
Yes.
for help. You're surprised at how willing they are.
Yes, and let them know that it's your first time.
Yeah.
Like some people really get excited when they have a newbie come in. I call them newbies because you know, you're not already coming in with a closed mind about different usages, right? Because
Yes.
sometimes you may go in and you want to use a specific product, but then they may give you an alternative to utilizing a product that may be more beneficial to you. And I'll say that because I went in one time and I was just looking for a tincture, and it was like, well, you know, we have this drink you should really consider trying, right? And once I tried the drink and how fast it absorbed and how fast I got relief, I was like, well, I never thought about a drink. I never thought
Yeah.
about it, right? And so just be open-minded to it, but definitely ask questions, and then give them feedback so that when you go back to them, they'll know what's working for you and what's not, right? Because again, they're only going to be able to tell you recommendations based off of what you let them know.
Mm-hmm. And then it looks like we had another question up here from Jakari. What should I consider when looking into topicals?
So with topicals, I love topicals that are oil based. Because for me, they absorb better into the skin. Some people like cream based topicals. For me, those just kind of sit on top of the skin, whereas the oil based ones will penetrate a lot deeper. So just think of it when you use a good, you know, like I like my topicals to have hemp oil in them. I like for them to have shea butter. I like for them to have essential oils in them because those essential oils are also going to work in conjunction with the CBD and the THC to help absorb a lot better. So when you're looking at topicals, oil based is better because the fat is going to help. Um, it's going to help with the transfer into the body versus a cream or a topical. They're just going to kind of sit on top of the skin. And it's not going to absorb. It's going to work, but it's not going to absorb like it would those oil based. So definitely recommend oil all day. But if you don't
And
have
is
access to that, then definitely a topical will work.
Okay. And is it the same theory that you were talking about with the CBD, where it's the when it comes to a topical that using them consistently is best, or can people
Yes.
expect to see more relief off of a one-time use?
So it again, you want to look at the milligram dosage because those also come in dosages. For me, I have a product that I use that once I use it, I know that it's going to work. Now, again, you want to be consistent in everything you're doing with this product because yes, you can use it one time and you'll get relief, but then when you start back in pain again and you use it and it's not working as fast, it's because it's having to build back up to get you back to that level of relief. So I'm always a big fan of consistency when using any product. Consistency is always going to be the best method.
Okay, perfect. And I think, to that point, don't do everything all at once, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
just like when you're trying to identify a trigger or when you start taking a vitamin and you think that it's helping you, if you do 13 things all at once, you're going to have absolutely no idea what actually had the best impact on you or if
Right.
anything did or what combination. So start out slow, do things one by one, check it out, and then go from there. And yeah, absolutely report back what you like, what you didn't like. And they'll adjust and help you accordingly. So
Yeah.
um Tamar,
And they're
thank you.
very
Oh, go ahead, honey. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, and your local bud tenders are very, I'm telling you guys, they, especially when you find one that is well knowledgeable about the products that they carry, when they're knowledgeable about different products, because sometimes they may work at a location, but they may have a recommendation that they may not carry at their store, but they can tell you how to get access to those, especially for our condition. And I say that because sometimes we need something a little bit stronger than what is carried in those locations. And they may be able to tell you of a different brand that has a higher milligram dosage that can help out. So again, having a conversation, you don't have to tell them your whole medical history, just tell them, hey, I deal with a condition that causes, X, Y, and Z, and I'm looking for relief, right? Because you want to tell them, what you're trying to get relief from, right? If you're not sleeping at night, you want to let them know, hey, I'm not sleeping, but I'm not sleeping because my body is in pain. My body is in pain because, I'm having this and I'm having this because, so that way they can say, okay, well, based off of this is what we would recommend. But CBD, I'm telling you, CBD is the game changer. It does not get a lot of credit because everybody right now is on the THC high, which is perfectly good. But CBD on a continuous basis will give you a lot of relief and improvement in our condition. Okay. And I'm telling you this for myself because I had to figure this out long term. And once I figured out, I've been able to slowly withdraw off of, some of the other methods that I've been using because I've been consistent, and my receptors are like, oh, okay, here we come. We got our medicine. We're balanced out, right? So my attitude has changed. My mood has changed. I don't suffer from depression. Like all of these things change because I've started using CBD on a continuous basis.
Okay. Yeah, and I've seen Tanya has been like preach and everything you've said about CBD, especially with when it comes to being consistent with it and everything. So I'm glad we're hearing it from multiple people as well.
Yes.
She's like, absolutely, you're on the right track. Yes.
Yes, I'm telling you, CBD is like, if that's and I know you're going to have another conversation with someone else about this, but guys, listen, I know we were talking about cannabis, but if y'all don't hear anything else I've said today, on March the 24th of 2024, CBD is it's the GOAT. It is the GOAT. I'm telling you. So yes.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you,
for
Tanya.
most of us who've tried almost everything, it's just one more thing that you can try to have in your arsenal. So I think
Mhm, mhm.
there's nothing beats a failure but a try, and it's worth,
Right.
going in and checking it out for sure. So
Yes. And I would just like to say one more thing.
yeah.
You guys, we are warriors, right? And I think that, a lot of times because of what we have been diagnosed with, I just want you guys to know that it is not the end all to be all. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. It is one of those things that, we get told a lot of no's, but there are yeses. Okay. So for somebody out there today who is at their wits' end, because I have a family member right now, and I was talking to Brandley about him. He's at his wit's end with this. But I want you guys to know that there is remission. There is possibilities for us to recover from this dis-ease. I believe wholeheartedly that every dis-ease is reversible. It can be cured. Okay, but it also comes down to our belief, and it also comes down to our actions. Okay, so we have to do the work, but I want you guys to keep getting the information, keep going, keep striving, keep finding things out about yourself, keep finding out what triggers. I've seen someone put in here earlier that stress. We cannot get away from stress. I agree totally, but we can remove some of the stressors from our situations, whether it's family, whether it's our friends, whatever those things that are contributing to those stressors, we can help limit those because at the end of the day, our self-care is healthcare. Okay. So take care of yourself the best way you can. Because it is possible. It is healing is possible. I believe that
Yeah.
wholeheartedly.
Absolutely. And remission, like you said, I mean, I'm pretty much in remission and my way was surgery. So it's
Hmm.
not a one size fits all disease. Like we all know what
Right.
works for one doesn't work for another. Um,
Hmm.
Unfortunately, it's like a moving target for most of us, but
Right.
absolutely, like the more positive our mindset can be about it, the better, results you're going to have from whatever it is that you're trying in your, in your HS journey. So, Tamar, thank you so much. This was
Yes.
incredible. It was so insightful, and you covered so much that I think is really, really helpful to the community as a whole. And you guys, if you want to reach out to Tamar, I put her email in the chat. So please do. She said she'll offer a free 15-minute consultation. So if you're curious about your own HS journey and how CBD, THC, any of the above could work for you, feel free to reach out to her and she'll kind of talk you through your individual experience and hopefully you can get some help on that. So thank
Yes.
you again on behalf of HS Connect. Thank you all for joining, and this will be recorded and you can watch it on a replay as well later in case you missed anything. So
Thank you so
thank you
much. I am
guys.
so excited. You guys have a great, great day. And
Yes.
we are warriors, HSers. We are
Yep.
warriors.
Thanks,
Thank you,
guys.
Brantley. I appreciate it.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.